it's your host Rashida Poonawala, and welcome back to another episode of GSB Insights, a podcast where we dive into the stories of leaders and innovators in business and finance. GSB Insights is all about giving young professionals an insider's view of the business world, the global economy, and geopolitics, so you can learn, grow, and stay ahead in today's fast-paced market. Hey guys, it's your host Rashida Poonawala, and welcome back to another episode of GSB Insights. Today I'm here with Sachee Trivedi. Thank you so much for being our first in-studio guest. I'm super excited to have you. And Sachee, you've had such an expansive career, from going to IIT in Kanpur to then working in engineering and then moving into consulting and getting your MBA at Columbia, and now working in investing, and you've started your own company. So there's a lot to talk about, and I'm not going to drag this on any longer, so let's just kind of get into it. Do you kind of just want to quickly give a little kind of briefing on kind of your career and like what you've kind of done and your journey to now?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and I'm just really grateful, that you're doing this, because I sincerely hope, this is useful for your audience. So I'm very excited to be here. So my journey up until Trident, if I can talk about that, is rather simple, and I think the way I would describe it is it's defined by three wise men of America. So when I was growing up in India, in fact, when I was in IIT, so this was around sort of late 90s, early 2000s. And I think there was a lot of despondency in India. India was mired in corruption. There was entrepreneurship was, not very common. Opportunities were limited. It didn't matter what you knew. It mattered who you knew. And I think it was an environment, that was that effectively, then resulted in a big brain drain out of the country. And it is at that time that I read the autobiography of Ben Franklin. And I was very moved. I was very touched. I was very impressed. And so I think the logical next step was to come to the land of Ben Franklin. So that's what I did. And I came here for my master's, and I worked here, and so on and so forth. The second, turning point in my life then was when I was doing consulting and just needed a bit more challenge, So I'm a very curious and a learning kind of a person, but I think the two things that matter to me is learning and impact, and I was trying to marry that. So if you think about engineering, enormous amount of learning, but impact-wise, like I was making a photo application for the Samsung phone. So I needed a little bit more impact. And when I was in consulting, I think there was more impact, but I think my learning, it was not as intellectually rigorous as a geek like me would, want things to be. So that is when, I was toying with the idea of what to do next. And so that's when American gentleman number 2 came into my life, and that was Warren Buffett. And I read his book, The Making of an American Capitalist, and I think I was sold. I was impressed. So that led me to join Columbia Business School, and and that started my journey of investing. And I think at business school, I knew I would be starting a fund one day, but everything else needs to come together for that. And so then it happened in around 2015. So I used to work in London at the time at global equities, and India had change of government. So Prime Minister Modi, came into power in 2014, and President Barack Obama was visiting India at the time. So I remember Prime Minister Modi and President Obama, doing a radio show, and Prime Minister Modi talked about the autobiography of Ben Franklin. And I was like, now this is interesting. This is new. So that's when I got really interested in India as a country to invest in, but the American gentleman number 3 that came into my life was, surprise, surprise, it was Charlie Munger's words of wisdom, the pithy words of wisdom, which was basically fish where the fish are. And I think that was then India was a very straightforward destination for me for my fund. So.
Yeah, I feel like also all three of those men have had such different impacts, not only on the U.S., but just globally, especially Warren Buffett. He just retired last year, and he kind of led his successor run Berkshire Hathaway, and it'll be very interesting to see what he does with that as well, especially since Warren Buffett, I guess you can consider one of the greats in investing, especially value investing. And another thing is, can you kind of talk to us a little bit about what it means to kind of invest in a country, like, and how the Trident portfolio kind of focuses on all of Indian equities?
Sure, absolutely. So, look, I think India needs a little bit of demystification. And I think India is really, it's not even misunderstood. I think it's just totally not understood. I think it's like not been studied. It's not, on anyone's radar. And I think there is something, to be decoded for the world about what India means. So, when people hear statistics like India is the fourth largest economy or fifth largest economy, and it's going to move up to being the third largest economy in a couple of years, people kind of intellectually get it, but then the imagery coming out of India is that of chaos and like traffic jams and a lot of noise and just a lot of commotion and like poverty and squalor and I think it's just so difficult to make sense of that. And there's a conundrum, like how do you feel comfortable investing your money in a country which just seems so chaotic, basically. And I think the decoding that that needs to be done is that India is not one country. India is 3 countries. So there's 160 million Indians who are like basically rich people in purchasing power parity terms. They are like $60,000 and above in terms of their income. And these are the people, that are Netflix, that are Cartier, that are Louis Vuitton, these brands, are reaching out to and addressing. And that's a rich India. And there's 140 million of them. So that's quite a lot. Then there's 300 million middle-class Indians, and these people are around, I think, maybe $12,000 to $15,000, income levels. So this is like a population of Indonesia with like income levels of a Thailand or a South Africa, maybe even like Canada, I suppose. So that's the middle-income India. And then there is like 1 billion poor people. And that's a lot of poor people. So when you go to India or when you see any image coming out of India, for every one rich or middle-class Indian, you see 9 poor people. So you're just overwhelmed and you think like, oh my God, like I don't know if my money is safe here, or, or I don't know if there's rules and, there's law. So you're just uncomfortable with that. And unlike in the US where you have the coasts and then there's like flyover country, in India, these 3 Indias are juxtaposed. It's a tapestry. It's not like a monolith. And that tapestry is, what gives the complexity of India or the complexity of understanding India or, investing in India. But to India's, kudos to India. India is a democracy. It's the largest democracy. And these 3 Indias live with each other in peace. And I think that's the beauty of it. And it's not just a rule of law, it's the cultural fabric, it's the absolute pacifist fabric, the non-violent fabric of India that makes, despite, those sort of income disparities, that just makes Indians live peacefully next to each other. So that is the layout in which, the lay of the land in which, you need to operate in. And the opportunity of India is, and the way we look at it at Trident is, so for the highest level, the richest class, there's a lot of companies that are very fast growing. There's commerce, like there's the e-commerce or quick commerce or insurance, those are fast growing categories in India. So we quite like it. The middle class India is a story of consumption, basically, whether it is housing, whether it is financialization, whether it's participation in stock markets, mutual funds, housing, healthcare. So we like those themes. So we are playing those themes. But then there is a ginormous opportunity of this billion people who will move up to middle class. So this middle class of 300 million people is going to move up to 800 million people over the next couple of decades. And that is where the growth and the duration of the growth is. So in the top two classes, we find growth. In the bottom class, we find the duration. And that's how compounding works. Yeah. That's what compounding is all about. So that's how we see this. And now a lot of countries have a lot of poor people, so should we invest in all of them? And I think what has happened in the last decade in India is that for the first time in a lot of people's lives, they got electricity connection, they got a bank account, they got identity, they got some level of healthcare coverage, they got some level of, roads and highways reaching their homes, they got like gas connection. So much of the groundwork has happened in India in the last 10 years in this bottom layer to kind of enable them to think not just in terms of day-to-day survival, but now, what do you want to do? What do you want to do for your children's future? So that is the enormous opportunity, that we see in India, and it's a multi-decadal opportunity. But bringing it back to investing terms, India is about compounding.
Yeah.
And I think compounding is the term where investing meets mathematics. Because compounding is a formula. The formula is, 1 plus r to the power of n. And people, I think focus a lot on r and focus less on n. And almost, I would just decode that a little bit because, and apologies to your audience, but this is the pure engineer in me,
no,
speaking.
Totally fine.
Okay, so if you think about it, so let's say, as an investor, you ideally want to invest in 100 baggers, right? So 100 baggers of the company, you put a dollar and, you kind of make $100 out of it, right? So if you think about it, what does a company need to deliver in terms of returns to be a 100 bagger? So if a company is growing, let's say, 15% per annum, right? You're probably going to take around 33 years for that company to become a 100 bagger. If a company is growing 20% per annum, it's going to take 25 years. If it's growing 25% a year, it's going to take 20 years. So you can do that. You can just do that math. What is the return and how long it'll take for us to get our 100 bagger? Now, what happens is people are allured. The allure of stock markets is that, oh my God, I found this company growing 50%. Now, at 50%, you will have your 100 bagger in 10, 11 years, which sounds pretty exciting. But what happens is that you're able to grow 50% for, a couple of reasons. Either you're very small, so, you're growing from a very small base, or you found a new market, a new niche, a new product, or something of the sort. And what happens is that in that case, competition comes in, second movers, bigger companies who have deeper pockets, and they come in and they take away that market from you. So while that 50% sounds very exciting, a lot of people are so enthused by that, the longevity of that 50% is at a higher risk. On the other hand, if you have a company, let's say, growing 20%, right? If you're growing 20%, it'll take you 25, 26 years to get to your 100 bagger. Now, this starts looking very interesting because at 20%, and you can even go 15%, so you're growing 30%. So now things become very interesting because it's not 15% growth is not as exciting that, people and the VCs and, everybody is trying to come in. And then you start focusing on the longevity of that growth. And the longevity of that growth is how how are you finding your growth? So is there opportunity? Is there penetration opportunity? Is there, is there appetite in the economy to, absorb your products? And are you getting that operating leverage in terms of maybe brand value, in terms of distribution scale, in terms of marketing efforts, in terms of, sort of use of technology that lowers your cost? And that is, what starts looking very, very interesting. And that mindset is very different. Warren Buffett puts it far more succinctly than what I have done. And he basically says, so Jeff Bezos asked Warren Buffett that, if it's so simple what you do, then why aren't many more people doing this? And he said, because nobody wants to get rich slowly.
Yeah.
Now, in an Indian context, I think that is kind of the lens, or that those are the opportunities we are looking for, where, we can build our wealth over the next couple of decades. And India becomes very important in that context, or very fertile ground for that, hunting those kind of stocks, because India's GDP growth rate is 10% nominal. So you have a strong tailwind helping. If you were expecting your company to grow 20% and your economy is growing 10%, half the job is done for you. Like, you have a very strong tailwind supporting you, and then you just have to do a good job. So we find it fertile territory. We see longevity and duration of growth. We find the ability to find, some strong compounders. And it is no surprise that after US, India is the country with the largest number of 100 baggers in the stock market. That's why India.
Wow. You're making me want to now invest in all Indian companies. But on that being a major topic of India, and again, India is such a large a country with so many different people from so many different backgrounds, and I guess you also have like that income gap, or you have like the richest of the rich, but then you also have like the poorest of the poor. But well, there is still so much opportunity there. There is also a lot of talk with AI and India kind of being the loser in that race compared to the US and China, with there being a lot of, especially someone who's looking to invest in India. Now, when you're throwing in AI into the mix, where do you see India? And do you think that this is a title that India should have, or do you think that India's going to change that very soon?
So, see, you are taking a huge risk of asking a technology, sort of enthusiast about AI. So you have to keep me honest on time. But basically, there is a saying that US innovates, China imitates, Europe regulates, and my humble addition to this is India participates. And let's take a step back, right? I think we almost need to look at technology and just trying to understand technology. Now, there was this nice paper by Professor Ajay Agarwal of the University of, I think, Rotterdam School of Management in Toronto. And he said a very interesting thing. He said, to evaluate technology, you see what does it reduce the cost of. So what does it reduce the cost of? So as an example, when computers came about, so what did it reduce the cost of? And it reduced the cost of computation, right? So it reduced the cost of computation. Then three things happen. Number one, industries or disciplines that were using computation or math started using more of it, right? So accountants and anybody, people loved using Excel because, now it just became so much easier. So industries that were using computation, or roles that were using computation started using more of it. The second thing that happened is that many other industries or roles or businesses got redefined as computation. So music, which was an analog industry, photography, that was a chemistry industry, right? They got redefined as computational, as digital products. And the third thing that happens is that the entire ecosystem of the old starts getting disrupted, So anyone with like photography studios and albums and people who were making films, like those people sort of got disrupted, and a whole new ecosystem starts coming around this new technology. So the Netflixes of the world, the Spotifys of the world, they came about as a result of this new technology. So totally new business models emerged out of this. And I think so. If you think about what does AI reduce the cost of? I think it's an evolving answer, and there are much smarter people than me, who are addressing these questions. But in my very simple, sort of humane way of understanding it, AI reduces the cost of forecasting, AI reduces the cost of personalization, and AI reduces the cost of experts. Now, forecasting, if I'm a restaurant and I'm trying to figure out like how many people are going to show up today, or if I'm a hotel, right? If I'm a hotel, I'm trying to figure out like how much room rate should I charge? If I marry that with like the weather data, with the data of events happening near and around me, maybe flight disruptions, because you get some of those people. If I can marry all of those data, I have a far better ability to forecast how many people would show up or want to book my hotel, and I can price it accordingly, right? And you see this, like a lot of industries are doing this. The second one, personalization, is basically what is called as like literally like n equal to 1. So today, if I'm learning a language, it is literally n equal to 1 because it's completely tailored to how fast I'm learning, and and the third one is experts, and experts is very interesting, and it's so. Again, today, if you are writing an article, like you literally have like ChatGPT, which is an expert editor, which can point out, like this is, you can do better here or better there. So you have that expert, on your on your phone now, on the tip of your fingers now. So then, when you think about disruption, who gets disrupted? So a country like India, the biggest challenge that a country like India is. Diversity, 29 languages, and even within languages, there are dialects, there are people with different preferences, totally different, like weather patterns, totally different like, festivals. All of a sudden, those things that were much harder to do, much more costly to do in terms of forecasting or in terms of personalization become possible. And experts is even more interesting because with India, like I think India has like 450 million children. The ability of the government or the country to provide quality education to all of those children relies on your ability to train that many, teachers and then professors and, counselors and, and that's not a small ask. You think about providing healthcare to like 1.5 billion people. Let's just imagine the number of like doctors and nurses and technicians and like lab technicians and medical devices, everything that you need. It is so hard. And now with AI, it becomes so much more possible. So contrary to being afraid of AI decimating India as an economy or as a country, I think this would be yet another moment when India is going to leapfrog on technology, just like it did. India never got to 100% landlines. It probably got to very abysmal, 10, 20% landlines. And they went straight to like mobile phones. And I think that's what's going to happen in India. So I'm genuinely excited about the opportunity of AI. Is AI or any new technology, sort of, are there uncertainties in the short run? Yes, probably they are. Is there disruption in the short run? Yes, probably they are. Is it going to be catastrophic? I'm a diehard technology fan. I just don't think so.
I think that just taking India out of the equation for a second, I think AI as a whole is super interesting and kind of a great technology in some aspects. Like you're able to learn anything if you just like ask ChatGPT something. Like I know, at least for me, like even like learning different like investing principles and stuff, like I'll type into ChatGPT and it'll give me a whole breakdown with examples.
Yeah.
And I personally find it so helpful, and I think it's just such a great tool to kind of help for people to learn different
Yeah.
things and kind of enhance
Yeah.
aspects. But then
Yeah. No, go ahead. I have a question for you.
But I just feel like it's a very interesting tool. But again, I understand there's so much like uncertainty and like also regulations that need to be put in place, which
I live in Europe. You're gonna do it.
yeah.
But I would ask you, the way you interact and you have woven AI into your life, would you say the same for your parents or your grandparents or like older uncles and aunts?
I feel like, at least personally, well, both my parents actually came from India back in like the early 2000s. Yeah. So I think for them, and especially like I feel like them using AI, like I know my dad is currently kind of using it and integrating it into what he does with his work. He's like started to integrate that, and I know a ton of different like banks and different companies are starting to train their employees on like how to use AI and that. And I think for younger, like people younger than me, and I have a younger brother, and for them, I feel like AI is such like a big part of now, like the way they learn and the way they do things.
Yeah.
And they use it for everything.
Yeah.
And I feel like also, even if you're kind of older, like using AI, I think is a little bit easier in some aspects than other like technologies, because you can put anything into your ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever AI platform you want and get answers to so many different questions. It'll pull up recipes for you.
Yeah.
It will kind of do it all, which I think is why it's such like a big thing, and like kind of everyone can use it in some capacity.
Yeah.
How many people are using it? That's another question. How they're like utilizing it, but I think like it's can enhance so much, and it's kind of beneficial to like people and like the way people are going to learn in the future.
Yeah, but I mean, you kind of sort of indicated, what I have observed. I think younger people are so much more comfortable with the use. I mean, I'm sure your younger brother is more AI native than probably your dad is, even though both of them are using, using AI. And this is what I've observed in India, and it is insane. Like I travel to India like 5-6 times a year, and when I see how these 20-somethings, these 15-somethings are using AI, every time I am shocked. I am genuinely shocked. There is something to be said for being younger, more adaptable, more, just absorbing it all, adapting to, something. And the fact that India has median age of 28, 29, it totally shows, how these guys are adopting AI versus, for example, I live in Luxembourg in Europe. Let's just say we are a little bit different. So anyway.
Yeah. No, I think it'll just be super interesting to see like how this like progresses. Also, gonna bring it back to finance a little bit, but with a bunch of these AI companies also starting to IPO and like people are able to invest in these publicly, I think this entire space is super interesting. And there's a lot to come from it with new AI models being created, and also just like with investing too. So I thought I would ask, what are your thoughts with all these IPOs? We just had SpaceX and now Anthropic and
sure.
OpenAI.
Look, first just the disclaimer, I'm a huge Elon Musk fan, so I would sort of give him money just to support his cause, because again, I'm I'm a technology enthusiast, so that's like I'm a Star Trek fan, and I'm Star Wars fan, so he is making that future real, and whether or not he succeeds, I mean, just the fact that he's giving it a shot is like he has my money kind of a thing.
Kind of insane, like all the things he's like doing, and he's like, I think next is Mars or the moon for him. So it's like it's always something, and it's like things that you wouldn't even think are possible. He's like going out and doing. So despite whatever your own opinions are on him, like you have to see like in science and in his field, he is one of the smartest people.
Absolutely. So that's like, for me, that's like a fanboy question. So fangirl question. So but coming from like wearing my investing hat, I think things get far more nuanced. And again, it's purely a mathematical thing. And if you look at ballpark, if SpaceX is like $2 trillion, and the investments that hyperscalers have done in the last 3 years, and this year is around to the tune of $2 trillion. These companies have to find hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue over the next. So it depends, right? Like if you say I've invested $2 trillion, I want my money back in like 7 years, which is asking for a very modest 10% return, then you need these companies to find that kind of hundreds of billions, like $1 trillion of revenue actually, in that time frame. And the interesting thing is that the revenue of these companies is the expense line of some other company. So is JP Morgan going to spend $100 million extra to pay, for Claude? Or is he going to cut something in his expense base, to fund that?
Yeah.
If he cuts something, it's potentially disruptive to jobs and, like economy. So if the cadence is slow, then the returns are lower. If the cadence is fast, then the risk of disruption is higher. So it's a very interesting thing. So I purely, mathematically look at it from a risk-reward perspective. I'm not in the business of making of forecasting. So I never venture, I never hazard those guesses. But it's it's an interesting thing. And creative destruction at its best is playing out as we speak. And, I'm an enthusiastic observer and but happy to do so on the sidelines.
No, I feel like it's such an interesting time with different technologies and all these different things even happening in like finance and Wall Street globally. Like there's just always so much going on, and some good, some bad. But nonetheless, as someone who is just, I guess, like curious or a learner, like it's super interesting to see all these different things happening and like watch it all play out. And it's kind of like we're living in a big moment of history and aspects. But we're gonna kind of go down a different path and sidetrack to a more little personal question. But you've lived in 3 different continents: the U.S., UK, and India. So first off, which place that you lived was your favorite, and what has living in all these different places taught you?
I think living in different countries, reading different books, it's like eating food. I am today, like, I don't even know which food I ate has made, which part of my body, but you just consume, you learn, you absorb, you observe, and it shapes who you are. It forms your thinking. And that's, that's what these experiences do to you. I also sometimes feel like I'm a time traveler, because when I'm in like Silicon Valley, I know I'm in a different era. When I'm in Europe, I know I'm in a completely different era. When I go to Bangalore, it's like a different world. When I go to like my hometown of Kanpur, it's it's a different time. So I do feel like time traveler. I think it's fun. As an investor, it's very interesting, because you kind of see, okay, you see this is where it can go, because this is how it happened, like in a China or in a US or in a Japan, and you could, take some, lessons from those experiences of, businesses and companies, and, apply those or find analogies in the, when I'm analyzing businesses.
Yeah. No, I think that's so true. And like kind of traveling to different places, you kind of learn from like all these different places and like the cultures and kind of everything, and it kind of builds who you are. Like every time I go back to India, like I feel like I walk away with like kind of a new perspective in some aspect. Because again, it's like you're going to these places where you're meeting so many different people, and just like the way like they live there is so much different than like how you would here. So I think that.
Where are you from in India?
Both my parents are from Mumbai.
Oh, nice.
Mumbai, yeah.
Nice. It's such a vibrant place, right?
Yeah, it's such a vibrant place.
Amazing food scene.
Great food, great culture. It's like.
And energy.
And yes.
Right? It's wow.
It's so different, and I love going back to India. Like I went to Hyderabad last year, and
nice.
Yeah, I have some family in like Ahmedabad.
Oh, cool.
So just like kind of all over, and
nice.
I enjoy going back every single time.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Because we are also running short of time. So my final question is, what advice would you have for any of our listeners that are interested in investing or even tech and kind of going down the engineering path as well? Just any advice you would have?
So those are two different questions. Invest Going down the path of investing is different. Going down the path of tech is different. But I'll try to answer both of those. Investing, I think, is about a jigsaw in your brain that you try to keep filling. And as Charlie Munger would talk about mental models, I think it is about mental models. And the more you know, the more you read, the different kind of stuff you read, the different countries you visit, different, books and authors and topics that you read upon, it just keeps filling, that jigsaw in your mind. I think the table stakes for someone to be an investor is curiosity, a deep desire to learn, humility, intellectual honesty, and really, sort of being comfortable sitting with a book or an audiobook or a podcast or what have you, and, kind of create that distance from the noise, and your own thinking, because that signal to noise ratio is very, very important. So that's for investing. For tech, it's a completely different thing. For tech, it's a very different thing. And tech, a career in tech, again, in and of itself, you can be an entrepreneur in tech, or, you could be an employee in a great tech company, right? I think there is something to be said about being geeky, about being back in the day. I mean, you get so you want to get that one data point right, and you want to get that one bug, sort of sorted, and you have to have that immense desire to solve problems, and you have to almost good enough is not good enough. Like there is a strive for perfection. There is you have to. I think there is a reason why techie people are like geeky and nerdy, because it's slightly different mindset. But again, like that's not the only job, right? Like then how do you sell the product? How do you observe the world? Because ultimately you're solving the problem for people and for the world and for the societies that you live in. So it does require, that careful observation and that thoughtful application of the technology. I mean, technology for technology's sake is not fun. And again, because I like to make an impact, so I think that's how I would look at it. But that's like tech, but I think even tech, you have to be a lifelong learner. Satya released a very thoughtful note, I think yesterday, which is basically using AI and to build a culture, a virtuous loop, a constant learning machine, whether individually or as organization. And I think in both the fields that I come from, that happens to be the truth.
Yeah, and I feel like it's true for anything, to just keep learning, keep reading, keep being curious.
Yeah.
Especially where you're in a day and age where everything is so accessible, any information, anything you could ever want to know, or kind of even just learn anything. So I agree with that, and I think it's great advice.
Cool.
Well, those are all the questions I have. Thank you so much for being on GSB Insights and as our first in-person studio guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and I hope your audience appreciates all the effort that you have put into this. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's all for today's episode of GSB Insights. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep gaining insights. I'm your host, Rashida Poonawala, signing off.